The test procedure for the field sieve analysis for coarse and fine gradations described in Section 5-692.215 of the MnDOT Grading and Base Manual and Section 1202 in the MnDOT Lab Manual follows the AASHTO T27 testing procedure for sieve analysis for determining the particle size distribution of grading materials. The distribution of particles for fine aggregates, material passing the number 4 sieve, and coarse aggregates, material retained on the number 4 sieve, of grading materials is determined using a series of sieves with square openings. The controlling sieves, or sieves with specific requirements for percent of passing material, are determined by the material requirements, also known as the gradation requirements, for a defined material type. Gradation requirements are found in the Materials section of the Standard Specifications for construction or contract documents if modified. This test procedure is used to verify the distribution of particles of defined material types with the specified material requirements after placement and before compaction at the required frequencies or for predetermined lots. After a representative sample of a material is obtained and split, the sample is then placed in a coarse sieve shaker with the required or controlling sieves. The material retained on each of the sieves is weighed and recorded. The material remaining in the bottom pan is split. One half of the material is washed to determine the amount of material finer than the number 200 sieve, and the other half is dried and placed in a fine sieve shaker with the required or controlling sieves. The material retained on each of the sieves is weighed and recorded. The percent of material retained on each sieve is then calculated in comparison to the initial weight of the sample taken. The gradation requirements, or required distribution of particles, for specific material types are determined based on the intended use, or application of the material, and the desired performance. For example, materials that are considered well graded or have an even particle distribution of varying size aggregates tend to compact more densely but offer poor drainage. Understanding the distribution of particles for a specific material, as well as verifying that they meet gradation requirements, helps predict how well the material will perform compared to its intended design and use. For this procedure, you will need an electronic scale with at least 2,500 grams capacity, sensitive and readable to 0.1 grams. Coarse sieves with a bottom pan, the common sizes are 3-inch, 2-inch, 1.5 inch, 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 3/8 inch, and the number 4 sieve, bowls, pans, and pails, and a sieve shaker for coarse sieves or rocker. The test procedure for the field sieve analysis for coarse and fine gradations: review the MnDOT Schedule of Materials Control and contract documents to determine the minimum sample rates for the specified material. Using one of the methods described in Section 5-692.100, sampling, random sampling, and splitting in the Grading and Base Manual, select a representative sample of material. When sampling, ensure the sample represents the material being placed and is sampled prior to compaction. When sampling, do not attempt to obtain an exact predetermined weight. Reduce the sample size using one of the splitting processes defined in the Grading and Base Manual, Section 5-692.140. Begin by stacking the coarse sieves with the pan on the bottom and the sieves arranged in order from the number 4 sieve to the 3-inch sieve on top. Using a pan or container of known weight, determine the weight of the sample being used to the nearest 0.1 pound on the electronic scale. Record the measured weight in the total WT of sample box on the GNB-101 form. Pour the sample onto the sieves and shake until less than 0.5% by weight passes any sieve during 1 minute. If using a mechanical shaker, shaking time shall be determined by a calibration procedure. When shaking, or upon completion of shaking, do not attempt to hand fit any rocks through a sieve. Once shaking is complete, examine each sieve for soil lumps and clay balls. Pulverize this material so that it passes through the sieves into the bottom pan. Never discard any clay balls from the sample. Weigh the individual portions of the sample retained on each sieve and the material contained in the bottom pan. Record each weight on the GNB-101 form. Field Sieve Analysis Test Procedure, Fine Gradation. For this procedure, you'll need an electronic scale with at least 2,500 grams capacity, sensitive and readable down to 0.1 grams. Standard 8-inch diameter fine sieves with a fitted top and bottom pan. The common sizes are number 4, number 10, number 40, and number 200. 2 number 200 sieves are required. 1 number 200 should be full height. Sieve brushes, used on the fine sieves, includes 1 bristle, sash brush is ideal, and 1 brass. Bowls, pans, and pail, stove or oven for drying, and a sieve shaker for fine sieves. Prior to testing the material, dry the sample to a constant weight. Using an electronic scale, record the weight of the dry material on the MnDOT GNB-101 form on line B. Place the fine sieve sample material into a pan and add enough water to cover the material. Stir or disturb the sample until the fine particles are in suspension. Pour the dirty water onto the full height number 200 sieve, making sure the sieve does not overflow. Tap the sides of the sieve sharply if the water does not flow through the sieve. Continue adding water to the sample and pouring over the number 200 sieve until the water appears to be clean. Rinse the material retained on the number 200 sieve and wash it back into the pan containing the clean sample. Pour off the excess water and dry the sample to a constant weight. Record the weight of the material on line C of the MnDOT GNB-101 form. Determine the loss in washing by subtracting the weight recorded on line C from the weight recorded on line B. Prior to placing the material over the nest of fine sieves, allow the sample to cool. Place the cooled sample over the nest of fine sieves. Place the nest of sieves in the sieve shaker and shake the sample until less than 0.5% by weight passes any sieve during a minute. When using a mechanical shaker, sieving time should be at least 7 minutes. While the material is being shaken, fill out the gradation requirements on the GNB-101 form for the sampled material. Once the material has been sufficiently shaken, remove the sieves from the mechanical shaker. Using a pan of known weight, individually weigh the material retained on each sieve using the electronic scale. Using a brush, make sure all of the material on the sieve is removed and collected in the pan. Record the weights in column 5 of the G&B-101 form. Repeat this process for each of the sieves. Report the number 200 sieve results to the nearest 0.1% and all other sieves to the nearest whole number. The check total of the individual weights, including loss of washing, should be within 5 grams of the original dry weight.